Amanda or Lynn, can I have you follow up with Lori? I don't see her back on yet. I know she was having some issues this morning.
I will.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Good morning, Commissioner Meyer.
Morning, Janelle. How do I sound?
You sound good. Thank you.
Okay, it's 8 a.m. We have a few members that are not yet on. We'll get the meeting started. Let's see. So we'll call the meeting to order. Welcome to all of our guests that may be watching us or will be watching us if they watch the recording. Janelle, you want to go through the virtual meeting guidance, please?
Certainly. Good morning, commissioners, members of the public and staff. To help us have a smooth meeting, I'm going to review just a few decorum rules for all. Number 1, please ensure your mic is muted unless you are speaking. Number 2, please state your name before speaking. Number 3, in general, please have your cameras on if possible if you're speaking. You may turn your cameras off if you're experiencing technological challenges. This goes for staff as well. And number 4, as a reminder, the public chat has been disabled, but you can still send messages to the host if need be, and the meeting is being recorded and streamed live on YouTube. With that said, let's have a great meeting, and good morning, everyone.
Okay, thank you, Janelle. Okay, we have a few introductions. Ray Schneider is going to introduce Aaron Stevens for the first.
Good morning, commissioners and Michael. My name is Ray Schneider, Collection System Supervisor. I'd like to introduce Aaron Stevens, who is joining our group. Previously, he worked part-time in the purchasing and receiving department and will now be full-time with Collection System Service Group. He came to the district from Trailless Bicycle Shop, where he was a shipping manager. His career experience includes purchasing, receiving, inventory, and accounting. His experience, along with his associate, a liberal arts degree from MATC, makes him a great addition to the district. While a member of the purchasing and receiving, Aaron was in charge of receiving, delivering parts to various groups, inventory, assisted various departments with scheduling. As a member of the CSS group, he will be working with user charge, setting up weirs, sampling equipment, collecting samples, and delivering samples for the lab for analysis. He will also be working in sewer maintenance area, doing manhole inspections, repairs, and assisting engineering department with projects. In time, he will also learn how to locate our underground utilities so that he may assist our locating group as well. Aside from work, Aaron holds 9 black belts, of that in first degree, and Hung Rang Do and Tai Su Do, karate. And Aaron lives with his wife and children in Sun Prairie. Please join me in welcoming Aaron to the district.
Okay, welcome, Aaron. Congratulations on your new position with the district. We have Julie Shu, who's going to be introduced by Nathaniel Hayden.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nathaniel Hayden, the operator supervisor. Julie joined the district in early June as a daytime 12-hour operator. She graduated from UW Stevens Point with a bachelor's degree in water resources with an emphasis in GIS. She's newer to the wastewater treatment, but she has a strong desire to learn, and she's been doing a great job so far. She enjoys spending time with her animals, especially with her flock of chickens. She is passionate about farming, health, and fitness. Please welcome Julie Shu to the district with me. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Nathaniel. Welcome, Julie. Enjoy your term or tenure. Paul, you're going to introduce Jane Landretti.
Yes, I appreciate the opportunity to do that. Jane recently joined our environmental team at Stafford. She has 17 years of experience before coming to us, including work with the Iowa Utility Group. She spent 6 years at DNR as a staff attorney working primarily on water issues. And most recently, she was chief legal counsel at the Department of Ag, Trade, and Consumer Protection. She has 2 small children, and in her spare time does triathlons and Ironman competitions. So I also want to note that Vanessa and I aren't going anywhere. I just wanted to let people know that we wanted to build some extra capacity into our team. And she joins 2 others that are part of our team that you haven't seen a lot of, but I just thought this would be an opportunity to let you know that they're there. And they do a lot of work in kind of the municipal environmental law interface area. One is Larry Konopacki, who worked at Ledge Council for 15 years before joining us a few years ago, and Rick Manthe, who had worked with the Towns Association for a while before joining us right before COVID hit. So with Jane, we now have 5 people with experience and background in these areas, and we look forward to welcoming Jane and being able to have a little additional depth when we deal with things for the district and others.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. And Jane, we look forward to possibly working with you. Okay, announcements. Michael, do you have any announcements?
President Hubble, I do not have any announcements this morning. Thank you.
Okay, we go to appearances by the public. Does any member of the public have any comments or wish to make an appearance on anything? Okay, I don't see anything. So we'll move to the consent calendar. We have the approval of the minutes from the last meeting, which was June 10th. Review and approval of sanitary sewer extensions, 1 new construction project and 3 reconstruction projects, all in the city of Madison for the reconstruction. The new construction is up in Tom's neck of the woods, Village of Windsor. Then we have award of contract and increased total project cost for the generator control panel upgrade, and then approval of increased transaction amount for 2021 digester cleaning. Do we have any questions on any of these items before we get a motion? Okay, seeing no questions, do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I'll make that motion, Tom. Commissioner Clark.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Clark. Do we have a second?
Wilson will second.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Clark, second by Commissioner Wilson to approve the consent calendar. All those in favor say aye.
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 And any opposed? None, motion carries. Okay, that will take us to topics. The first topic is Drew Susie is going to talk about the 2020 Compliance Maintenance Annual Report, otherwise known as CMAR. Drew?
Good morning, Commission. Janelle, do I have a sharing screen ability?
You are co-host.
Okay. Oh, there it is. Okay, it looks like I have my presentation up here, so I'll get started on that. I guess just let me know if you have any trouble hearing me or can't see the screen. But they said, my name is Drew Cease. I'm a regulatory and process engineer at the district, and I'll be talking to you about the 2020 Compliance Maintenance Annual Report, or CMAR, as I'll be referring to it. So I believe most of the commissioners have seen a CMAR before. So I'll just briefly kind of go through a bit of the background on it. It's required by Wisconsin Admin Code, actually shows up in our permit as well, requiring us to submit one to DNR every year, present to our governing body, which would be the commission, and then have approval before submitting back to DNR. So first and foremost, the main purpose of the CMAR is to make sure that we're meeting our goals of protecting public health and the environment. And really a way that this report does that is it acts as a communication tool between the utility, the governing body, and DNR. Basically summarizes the performance of the plant the previous year and make sure that those three entities are kind of all on the same page about what the utility is doing well and what other areas need improvement. So there's a few things that the CMAR is not. This really isn't an opportunity to report new data or new information or new compliance or exceedance issues. All of that information has really been reported to DNR before in monthly reporting. So there shouldn't be, I guess, any surprises that will be appearing in the report. It's mostly just a summary. Also, it's not specific to each wastewater treatment plant. So by that, I mean Milwaukee, Green Bay, Madison essentially has the same report as a lot of these smaller communities too. So because of that, it might seem like there's different focus placed on areas that might not be 100% applicable to what we do here at the district. So that's why it might seem that some things don't necessarily fit. And then last, it's not meant to be punitive. Like I mentioned, DNR has already seen this information. Any kind of follow-up from a regulatory agency has already been in the works at this point. And it's really meant to just kind of prompt a discussion on what needs improvement and what we're doing well. So the first half of the report really focuses on quantitative plant performance. So essentially looking at our effluent quality with respect to a number of different parameters. And then later half of the report really digs into more of the qualitative questions, such as, what are we doing as a facility to address I&I? Do we have the right financials in place to implement projects to address a host of issues? Do we have the right maintenance program set in place? Is there enough staff? So topics such as that. And with that, I'll dig into the 2020 results. This is our report card, if you will. As you can see, there's a lot of A's on the left column there, which is always good to see. We did have a B this year in our effluent quality with respect to ammonia, and then a D in biosolids quality and management. I'll jump into those areas a little bit more with a little bit more focus in a second here, but overall we have a 3.46 out of 4.0 GPA. So pretty good overall. As I mentioned, we had an A in 8 out of the 10 subjects. Sorry, I got a chatty cat here. 8 out of 10 subjects. We had 20 points removed overall. 5 points were for a monthly permit exceedance that occurred in August for ammonia. And then we had 15 points deducted for over application nitrogen with our biosolids. So this doesn't impact our score overall, but the CMAR requires that any overflows that we have need to have a resolution attached to them. So in 2020, we had 5 overflows total. DNR makes a distinction between SSOs, which are sanitary sewer overflows, and TFOs, which are treatment facility overflows. Basically, a TFO occurs within the treatment plant itself from a process, or the SSO would be in the collection system from like a manhole or a pump station. So in 2020, we didn't have any overflows in the collection system, which is something worth noting there. 2019, we had one. So the last couple of years, we've been really, really good about keeping the wastewater where it needs to be. Obviously, 2018 kind of stands out. We had 9 that year. You might remember that was a year with pretty widespread flooding in Madison area. So that's why that number kind of stands out there. So to dive into the grades specifically and why we received the grades we did, with our ammonia, we have 2 limits throughout the year. There's a winter limit and a summer limit. The summer limit is more stringent than the winter one. You can see from this chart here that in August, we did have that month did have a higher average than what our permit allows there. So that is why we received a B in that section. To dive into that a little bit closer, in August, this is the daily data here. You can kind of see we had 2 high ammonia excursions. Both of them were related to our liquid processing improvement construction. The first one, we had a shutdown of half of the plant, and that really impacted our treatment processes and took a couple of days to recover from. And the second spike there is also related to our liquid processing improvements, where we had some issues restarting a blower after a power outage. So each of these alone necessarily wouldn't have put us above our monthly limit. We actually have a daily limit on some of these that is quite a bit higher. It's 11 milligrams per liter, which kind of allows for these one-off excursions, but just due to the fact that we had 2 of them in the same month, just kind of barely put us over the monthly limit. So that's why we received a B in there. It's worth noting that you can kind of see the valley between these 2 spikes here is that once our processes return to normal operation, effluent ammonia returned back to normal there. So it was really just due to the construction that we were doing. And the other score that we received below B was in biosolids management. If you've been on the commission for a couple of years now, you know that this is a section that we've had A's in and D's in the past. It kind of seems that we're alternating every year in there. Basically what this is due to is an over application of nitrogen on our farm fields. Any instance of an over application automatically scores a D. So that's kind of why we're seeing a flip-flop there. The way that we're addressing over application issues is we're phasing out some of the older biosolid application technology. The new applicators that we have now are equipped with GPS inside of the units. So this gives the operator a lot more real-time feedback on where they're applying biosolids. With the older equipment, it's kind of going out into the field and flagging the areas that can have biosolids applied to them and which areas should be avoided. So with that, there's a lot more room for human error, which is what we've seen in years past. So we believe that with the new applicators and the GPS fitting in there, that removes some of that human error. Also note that we had a really successful year as far as MetroGrow biosolids application. 2019, we had you can see the figure on the screen there, 3,500 acres applied to, and then this past year was up around about 5,000. So that is due to the weather that we had in 2019. A lot of wet weather in early winter really prevented us from getting the biosolids out, and we ran into storage issues at the end of 2019, early 2020. But in 2020, the weather really held out for us. It might have been a really difficult year in every other respect, but at least we had good weather for biosolids application. So we didn't run into any storage issues in 2020. Also give a little bit more detail and background on the overflows we experienced. I mentioned we had 5, all of them were within the treatment plant. We had a lot of construction going on in 2020, and with a lot of construction comes room for contractor error, and a couple of the overflows that we saw at the treatment plant were directly related to contractor work. Specifically, I included a photo in the foreground here of our septic receiving. This is where we were doing a headworks metering improvement project. Contractor forgot to cap a line there, and so we had septage kind of draining into their excavation site. So that was one of the overflows. And then above that, we just have a picture of a manhole where we experienced some sludge coming out of a manhole. Really, I'd say 4 of the 5 overflows that we had were all really small quantities, less than 500 gallons of material. So these are really, contained to the treatment plant and small quantities. So the impact that it has to environment or public health is pretty negligible. The one significant, I guess I'll call it significant overflow that we had at the treatment plant was from our effluent force main, Badfish Creek effluent force main. We had, so the force main kind of has a Y, kind of juts off from the force main itself. And we had a corroded pipe fitting, as you can kind of see in the bottom picture there. It was on top of the Y. There was actually 2 fittings that had been left during following installation. One of them had corroded and was leaking treated effluent into the construction zone. And what we did to resolve that was essentially just remove both of them, the leaky one and the other one preemptively, and pump that down. So that was really all contained to the treatment facility as well. So I'll just wrap up here. I'll say we had a successful year. We consider a 3.46 GPA out of 4. The CMAR requires that any grades that we have with a B, or excuse me, below a B, require a explanation and a response action. So there was one section where we had that, which is the biosolids management, and are outlining that the new applicators will address some of the issues that were presented in that section. And then as they went through this presentation, just pointed out the causes of some of the overflows that we had. And although it's not required, since we did receive a B in the ammonia section, I do include an explanation of that in the CMAR, just since typically we receive an A in that section. So I wanted to call attention to why we have a lower grade than we have in the past. So next steps for that would be certification and submit to the DNR before June 30th. So with that, I'll open it up for any comments or questions that the commission might have.
Okay, thank you for the presentation, Drew. Does anyone have any questions before we get a motion? Okay, I don't believe I see anybody. No hands up or anybody waving. Okay, so do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar, or I'm sorry, the CMAR?
It's Wilson, Tom. I'll move approval of the CMAR report and resolution as presented.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Wilson to approve the CMAR as presented. Do we have a second?
I'm happy to second. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say I'll second it.
Okay, so we have a second by Commissioner Buckland. Motion by Commissioner Wilson, second by Commissioner Buckland. Any further questions or discussion?
Thank you, Drew.
Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 And any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much, Drew. That will take us to the acceptance of the Biosolids Management Plan. Marty, do you have anything you want to add other than a couple weeks ago?
Yes, I do. I have a short presentation, just a big short recap. 1 second here while I pull that up. You should be hopefully seeing the screen. And I'll just start my video pretty quickly here. So just here we go. Just to recap, we conducted the biosolids management study that developed the plan in 2020. And we came to you earlier this month, and we had a study session on some of the recommendations and also to get some input from the commission, just to make sure that the road forward aligns and supports the commission policy outcome to be. So in the study session, just so everyone's on the same page, that it was identified that emerging contaminants, energy, and nutrient management were areas that really should be further considered as any part of our management of biosolids moving forward. So just to reiterate that the biosolids study and the resulting management plan did assess some of these areas and provides a foundation for moving forward with future examinations for these particular areas. So the recommendations, so we know what we're looking at for the resolution, is a focus on 2 projects as a priority that will solidify the long-term direction. The first project is the global data management, which is associated with how the district manages biosolids in terms of our holistic data mapping and efficiencies. And just to tie in with the CMAR report you just saw, some of those efficiencies that we'll be able to gain by outfitting our equipment with better electronics is something that can be tied into this particular project. And then the second project is an applied research program, just to begin to start understanding, what dewatering is available, what the market will bear when it comes to a Class B cake, what the viability of that project, really trying to look at, can we make what our customers will accept? And, depending on some of those answers that come out of these researches will help, future decision-making that will be coming to the commission for. So it's a phased approach, and it's a long-term vision. And so, we're looking at the Class B cake as a flexible platform that potentially could lead to Class A, but, we need to really make sure that this is a long process. We need to really future look at what type of impacts Class A would have. Maybe Class B can be made to work, maybe it can't. Maybe beefing up the liquid program is the way to go. So no decisions really have been made on if we're going to do a Class A or not. That's a future decision the commission will be looking at based upon some of those answers and information coming from the first phase. So with that recap, I'll end there and just put the request out for acceptance of the resolution accepting the management plan. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Marty. Do we have a motion to accept the Biosolids Management Plan?
I'm happy to make that motion. It's Commissioner Meyer.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Meyer. Do we have a second?
Wilson, I will be happy to second it as well.
Okay,
Thanks, Marty.
We have a motion by Commissioner Meyer, second by Commissioner Wilson to accept the Biosolids Management Plan. Do we have any discussion or questions? Okay, I think that we covered a lot of the material last meeting. Okay, we'll vote. All those in favor of the motion and accepting the biosolids management plan, say aye.
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 And any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you, Marty. That will take us to item C, the study session on the 2020 Energy Management Master Plan update. Matt Seib.
Good morning, commissioners. Bear with me a moment while I share my screen. All right, are you able to see my presentation now?
See it, man.
Excellent.
There you go.
Okay, so good morning. I'm Matt Seib, Process and Research Engineer here at the district, and I'm kind of running point on the Energy Management Master Plan project. Here to give you a little bit of an update on where we're at. So first things first, the project is not done. If you're a baker, I would say we're at the stage where the cake's in the oven and we're just about ready to take it out, but we haven't, it's too hot to put the icing on yet. So we're getting close, but we're not quite there. And, but we have a lot of good information, and really what we're trying to do here is provide some context to you all for some of the CIP discussions that'll be coming in future meetings, so you understand what we're talking about when we highlight some of those projects in the CIP. So again, a little quick review here. The motivation for this project really is being driven by our aging infrastructure situation. We have a lot of aging infrastructure here that we know we're going to need to address in the near future. And so as we're thinking about that, we're reflecting on our outcomes policies and asking how can we deal with our aging infrastructure in a way that also helps improve our energy management, both in terms of how we consume energy, but also procure it or generate it. So really the driver here is how to deal with infrastructure. What the study is not doing is just proposing projects for the sake of doing energy related work. So some background in terms of a reminder on what the study was supposed to do. We wanted it to establish a new baseline and quantify, how much energy are we using right now, and also forecast our energy needs in the future. And then really the substance of the project is to identify alternative strategies that the district could use to advance its goals and policies related to energy. And then prioritize the alternatives that are viewed as most valuable based on their level of impact, how complex they may be, and of course, cost. And ultimately, the deliverable from this plan will be to provide some business cases that could be included into our future capital improvements planning process. So when we talk about project scope, there's some nuance here. So really the emphasis for this work was looking at the treatment plant, Nine Springs plant. And in particular project areas of the plant that are not already being covered in other project work at the plant. So Drew earlier today was telling you about how we've had a lot of construction going on. Those areas are not really under consideration because they're going through infrastructure improvements right now. So some of the considerations that we're wanting the master plan to incorporate are reliability and resiliency of energy. So those two terms mean different things. Our emissions impact from using energy, so greenhouse gases, cost, of course. Also, our process efficiency and our overall demand for energy, and how we are able to use and generate renewable energy and how we could identify ways to increase both of those aspects. There are some things that are specifically not included in the scope of the project. So I was just saying, areas of the plant that are currently in another project are excluded. Also, our pumping stations and collection system. Reason for that is we're expecting to consider energy in those areas in other upcoming projects. And specifically for considerations, we did not include a specific goal to look at energy independence, energy neutrality, or backup generators at the plant. However, this is a gray area. That's why it's got a gray box, because we did end up bringing some of those considerations into the study in the end, because they seemed relevant to talk about, particularly given some of the questions and feedback the commission has given us in past touch points. So the master plan is looking at in kind of two basic areas. The main one is technology. So what kind of equipment and processes can we use to impact our energy use, but also how we generate energy. But then we're also looking at solutions. So this is more about the how. How do we navigate infrastructure upgrades and things in the future? So can we identify partnerships that might allow us to do something that we wouldn't have been able to do? Are there different business models that we might be able to take advantage of? And are there funding opportunities that could incentivize some of these improvements if they otherwise might be too expensive on their own? So the point of this slide is basically just to tell you that we drag netted a lot of information at the beginning of the project. So I'm going to be talking specifically about 10 or 11 different things in a grouping of different combinations. But I just want to make it clear that when we started this, we actually had over 130 different ideas that we came up with, and the project serially, whittled those down to the ideas that were the best or the most promising, or the ones that would be most appropriate for the district. So we're going to be talking about the most promising subset, but we didn't immediately start with those, is the point here. So this decision tree is just kind of giving you a sense for the different areas of our operations and our infrastructure that we ultimately landed on as the primary areas to consider. So looking at things like co-digestion, or how we bring waste into the plant and might be able to digest it, process it, make energy out of it. Our biosolids areas, biogas, thermal energy, how we produce renewables from other sources, and then also pumping. We're kind of the main theme areas, but then these subpoints underneath are those 11 different alternative areas that group within those process areas. So what we ended up doing is creating combinations with those individual items to create different scenarios with different themes to consider. So we came up with 4 that you can see here. So we have an enhanced baseline, and I'll explain these more in the next few slides. But then maximizing renewable energy production and consumption. So how can we take all the available energy at the plant and get the most out of it? We also thought it would be good to look at a grid independent scenario, since that idea has been floating around the district for a while. And then also we wanted to look at how could we simplify our infrastructure and our processes, but also make advancements in how we use and produce energy. So talking about the baseline, we identified a number of different things that would work well together. So we identified some ways to simplify our digestion and solids processing, and this is comes right out of the biosolids management plan that Marty has previously told you about. So this would simplify digestion and assumes that everything would go to a Class B cake. And that does have energy advantages, primarily in the amount of energy needed for hauling and land application, because we significantly reduce the mass of material that we're transporting. We would be looking at just doing an efficiency upgrade essentially on our engine generator systems in terms of how we use biogas to make electricity. We would need to do some housekeeping updates on our heat loop system. And this also would suggest that we eliminate the Badger Mill Creek effluent discharge point. And I know that's a contentious issue. I will explain that more in a few slides, so hang on. And then we also looked at what it would mean to possibly add some sort of large scale solar. So we evaluated the scenario both with and without large scale solar. When we talk about maximizing renewable energy at the facility, this is essentially the same as the previous scenario, but we've now done is said that we would look for ways to utilize waste heat that we have at the plant. So our engine generators produce a lot of waste heat. We want to know how could we use that. So we identified a process where we could potentially, include that, capture that waste heat and beneficially reuse it to enhance what we're already doing. The grid independent scenario looks a little bit different. So we're still maintaining the same biosolids improvements, but we'd now be moving to a large cogeneration scenario where we would significantly upsize our engine generators and purchase natural gas in addition to the biogas that we produce, so that we would be able to produce all of our own electricity on site. We basically have a power plant at the treatment plant. We would eliminate potentially large-scale solar there, because if you're going to have generators that are sized large enough to run the whole facility, putting in solar then makes them inefficient. So there's kind of a back and forth game you got to play here. And then there would also be a different type of upgrading needed for the heat loop if we were going to do that. And then lastly, infrastructure complexity. This is kind of an oddball. It's a little bit different. So again, we'd be looking at the same kinds of biosolids and digestion changes, but instead of using our biogas on site in generators, we would actually clean the gas, upgrade it to natural gas pipeline quality, and sell it. And this would also require some heat loop modifications. And we considered this scenario both with and without solar. And really the reason behind considering this is that cleaning the gas up and selling it would potentially serve as a significant revenue source for the district, and it would also eliminate a lot of the infrastructure complexity that comes with owning and operating cogeneration systems. Those engines require a lot of maintenance and upkeep, and there are a lot of assets associated with them. So this would simplify our operations. So when we looked at these four combinations, we kind of identified option 1 and option 4, the enhanced baseline, where we continue using gas on site, but also option 4, where we export our gas, as the two most promising options of these four. And now I'm going to get into some more of the takeaways and details of this. So first of all, the heat and power assets at the plant are the areas with greatest need. Our engine generators, the radiator systems with those engines, the hot water systems connected to them, the biogas conditioning systems are all nearing the end of their useful life and are the assets that likely require attention first. So those should be our priority assets in terms of moving forward with infrastructure needs as it relates to energy. exporting our biogas, so that last alternative, would likely result in a lower overall cost to the district over the life cycle of that option, and it would reduce our infrastructure complexity. However, because of how we would be selling the gas, there is some added level of cost volatility there that we would have to be aware of and manage. And I'll show what that means more in a few slides. In terms of greenhouse gas impact, using gas on site in engines actually would be the best way to reduce our greenhouse gas footprint, especially if we upgrade our engines to more efficient models. However, this is a gray area because there are other ways that we may be able to achieve a greenhouse gas improvement, and I have another slide about that later. If we want to increase renewable energy generation, and generation is important, the key word there, the studies suggest that we take a strong look at a renewable energy rider program with MG&E. So this would be a way for us to incentivize and develop large-scale solar in the Madison area. When we talk about energy resiliency, we concluded that installing backup generators is probably the best way for the district to have an energy resilient situation. So when I say resiliency, what I mean is we have a good fallback option if our primary source of energy goes away for some reason. So if there's a terrible storm and the power grid goes down, where else are we going to get electricity from? The most straightforward way is backup generators, and it's probably the most cost effective. When we looked at energy independence, really we concluded that this is technically possible, but it's probably not cost acceptable, and it would increase our infrastructure complexity, which is something we're looking to avoid. And lastly, effluent pumping. So the master plan is recommending that we consider discontinuing the Badger Mill Creek force main, and this is for two reasons. One, it's significantly more energy intense to pump water to Verona than it is to pump it through our larger force main to Badfish Creek. Also, that the Badger Mill Creek outfall has a more stringent permit requirement, which means that it's driving our level of treatment, and in the future, we anticipate that we would need to add tertiary treatment to that outfall to comply with permit, which would also increase our energy demands at the plant for treatment for that force main. So by eliminating it from an energy perspective, we would actually be increasing our efficiency of effluent pumping and avoiding additional energy demands in the future. However, we also recognize that there's a lot more that goes into that scenario. There's non-energy related considerations there, but from an energy perspective, it would make sense to consolidate to one outfall point. So when we think about using versus selling our biogas, this gets very interesting. Overall, what we've concluded is the economic situation is similar with each of those directions. However, the energy implications are very different. So in one, we're using that energy on site. In the other, we're exporting that energy for somebody else to use, which means that we would have to procure more energy for ourselves. And so there are, cost implications and also greenhouse gas implications there. So really what we're saying is we need some leadership and commission input here to understand if there's something about one of these options that's very concerning, or if there's a particular aspect of either of these that's most intriguing or most desirable. So now let's get into costs a little bit for these alternatives. So I'm going to keep this at a very high level. But what this is showing is that in any situation that we look at in order to address our aging infrastructure concerns, there's going to be some noticeable costs. So these are some big numbers. We all understand that. And there are differences here. What this is showing is that alternative one, which is just using biogas on site in our engines with upgrades and exporting the biogas, have similar capital costs. For some context, if we look at what the capital costs would be to simply just maintain our infrastructure and replace equipment exactly in kind, we're saying that would be about $40 million. So these alternative costs that I'm showing are higher, but it's not like we're not going to have to spend money anyway, is the point here. So in the next slide, this is showing the overall life cycle cost. So the previous slide was showing the capital costs. This is capital and O&M over a 20-year life cycle. What this is showing, the first set of bars is our baseline. So this is just keep doing exactly what we've been doing. We make no improvements. We just replace infrastructure exactly in kind, and keep moving forward. And then the other bars are each of the scenarios. So what this is showing is if we upgrade our cogen system to more efficient engines and make improvements elsewhere, we likely can see an overall lower life cycle cost, even though the capital costs that I showed in the previous slide are higher. So the efficiency gains that we get from these improvements will pay off in the long run. And the black bars are showing the level of cost sensitivity that we anticipate. So what this is showing is that if anything, we're overestimating a little bit right now. Likely when we go to sharpen our pencil to a finer tip, we may see that these costs are going to come down. This is also showing that the situation where we export our gas and sell it is expected to be cheaper, the cheapest of all of these options. There's more volatility here, but even with the level of volatility that we are expecting, we would still be at or below any of the other options, even our baseline option where we just maintain what we're doing. So now let's talk about the overall energy impact of these different scenarios. So this is a net change from our baseline. That's why the baseline here shows no bar. What this is showing is that alternatives 1, 2, and 3 each would have significant increases in the amount of energy that the district generates. In alternatives 1 and 2, those amounts generated would come from what we would consider renewable energy. Alternative 3 was the energy independence alternative. So this bar also includes purchasing a lot of natural gas to run generators. So this isn't all green energy. Alternative 4 is exporting the gas. So now we would have to buy a lot more electricity from the grid. But if we were to add a large-scale solar installation, we could essentially cut that amount in half, is what this is showing. So there are, big energy implication swings in terms of both how much we need and where we get it from, and also what form. So now when we think about greenhouse gas emissions, there's some interesting nuance here. So what this is showing is 1 million tons of CO2 emitted per year in the year 2040. So at the end of our planning window. So if we just keep doing what we're doing right now and makes no technology changes, we're at about 34,000 million tons of CO2 emitted. If we simply upgrade our engines to more efficient models, we can reduce that by about 70%, by about half. And if we go with an alternative where we are exporting our gas, you would think that this would mean that our our greenhouse gas footprint would actually go up. But the box is drawn differently here. The gas that we would sell would ostensibly be used in renewable fuel standard programs to offset diesel fuel for heavy truck fuel. So there's a greenhouse gas reduction even by selling our gas when you look at the global energy market. Now the nuance here, the gray area, is that by using the gas on site, we'd actually have the lowest greenhouse gas emissions. There's two other things to consider. One, a lot of this is based on the greenhouse gas footprint of the power we procure from MG&E. So right now, MG&E's power, I don't know the numbers offhand, but I want to say something like half of it comes from fossil fuel sources. MG&E has a goal of significantly reducing and actually eliminating all of their fossil fuel generated power over time, I believe by 2050. So even if we did nothing in the long run, if we procured standard mixed power from MG&E, our environmental footprint will go down. However, we could also simply buy into their green power program right now and procure all green renewable power from them. So these numbers are showing the emissions that would come from the district taking action within its fence line. But there are other ways the district could reduce these greenhouse gas emissions by procuring renewable power from MG&E, either passively or actively. And the only issue there is that each of these alternatives impacts the amount of that renewable power that we would need to procure. So talking more about renewable power, I mentioned the Renewable Energy Rider program. This is an interesting tidbit that we've uncovered. So initially, we were assuming that the district might need to construct and operate its own large-scale solar array if we want to really increase our renewable energy production. But MG&E now has this Renewable Energy Rider program where the utility would own and operate the solar array. It would just be built on MMSD property, and we would establish a long-term contract to purchase that power from them at a stable fixed rate. So this program has a lot of interesting advantages in that it would allow the district to procure renewable power. It would also incentivize the development of new renewable energy generation in the area. It would secure stable power pricing for us for the long term. And it would keep infrastructure assets off of the district's books. So we would not be responsible for the actual hardware. So that's an interesting thing that we believe we should be talking about more in the future. So when we talk about energy reliability, all of these alternatives are expected to improve system reliability at the district. So we're talking about simplifying our processes, replacing older assets with newer assets. We are going to end up with a more reliable system no matter which option we go with, is kind of the conclusion here. However, when it comes to energy resilience, so where do we get our energy from and what happens when our primary source goes away, what we're concluding here is solar does not add resilience unless you have battery backup, because the sun's not out when it's raining or when it's dark out. That's pretty obvious. But also cogeneration does not add the level of resilience that we might think it would, because when you design a cogen system that's large enough to fuel the entire or power the entire facility, it gets very complicated, and it's technically possible, but it may not be as reliable as we would like it to be. And so it's also not necessarily the best option for us. So really what that means is if we want to improve our energy resilience, we should likely be considering backup generators. There are potentially two ways we could do that. We could lease generators from MG&E, and or we could buy the generators ourselves and own and operate them for backup power. And so in one of these options, we are not responsible for the assets, and the other we are. If we were to buy the generators ourselves, the expected payback compared to leasing would be in the 10 to 12 year range. So I know I just threw a lot of info at you. I'm wrapping up here. So next steps are to complete this study. We expect to have the final report done by the end of August. And then we expect to begin moving into facility planning, design, and construction in these various process areas. And we intend to implement these projects in phases, so it's not like we're going to do it all at one time. So this work will be distributed out over a number of years. So with that, I'll open up for questions and discussion. And I did want to highlight two questions that we as staff are interested to hear from the commission along as part of this discussion. So first, is there any portion of what I presented that you would consider unacceptable or needing to be reconsidered? And then also, is there anything about what we just went through right now that you're uncomfortable with or don't completely understand? So with that, thank you, and I look forward to any questions.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Matt. You raised a number of, I think, to me, interesting issues and some real policy things, particularly one of them being the Badger Mill Creek and others. So we'll begin. Ken, you have your hand up?
Yeah, Matt, good job on creating 100 questions in my mind. This is all good stuff to talk about. To answer your two questions first, I don't see anything unacceptable. The Badger Mill Creek, I have some questions on that. The main question I have for you is, can you take those alternatives and put them on a summary grid with the main components for each alternative? So it's a little easier for myself and the commission to try to come to some determination of what we feel is the most important and least important to us.
So are you, could I clarify, are you asking which types of considerations may be most important? Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, for each alternative. You've touched on a number of very good topics. If I could see that in a summary, I'm going to call it a grid, as a comparison. That would, at least as a commissioner, that would help me provide some more productive feedback to you.
Like a matrix, looking at the alternatives and the variables and considerations.
Yes, I believe I understand what you're asking for, Commissioner Clark. I'll work on that.
Okay, thanks, Matt.
Okay, anyone else? Grant.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Lots of great info there. I think to answer your questions, I'd also say no issues. I guess one question or suggestion for when you come back would be to, I think I'm most interested in when we're talking about like total greenhouse gases or renewable energy, to just get a little bit more clarity around, so we can analyze that from a MMSD perspective, or maybe sort of a more global perspective. And I'm I guess, a little bit more interested in that second one. So when we're sort of evaluating different alternatives or options in terms of how much greenhouse gas or amount of renewable energy, I'm a little bit less interested in like how we can structure it to say MMSD is doing X on these fronts versus kind of total community impact. And I think in some of those it maybe was like greenhouse gases, maybe it did account for if we're exporting gas, for example, sort of getting some credit for that. But I guess that would just be helpful when we're doing kind of that ultimate analysis, like how are we helping the world sort of net versus what's happening, what we can kind of give ourselves credit for, if that makes sense. And just initial reactions on kind of what you shared. I mean, the three things that really stood out for me were, it seems interesting to really explore the export model to me more than creating our own power generation. And I think really exploring larger scale solar, whether it's sort of owned and operated versus the leasing model with MG&E. I think that's something we really should be pursuing and really dialing in what either of those options looks like for us. And then I think, as others have said, digging in deeper on the Badger Mill question seems like another really important one. So those were kind of the three things that stood out for me, but really great info and looking forward to the final version.
Okay, thank you, Grant. Beth?
Hi, thank you. Yeah, it was a good presentation. I agree. A grid would be really helpful to put out all the alternatives together so we can see it in one place. I'd be interested in how we might partner with MG&E going forward and more information on that, because that seems like some really good opportunities there, not only with the solar energy and renting equipment, but longer term, how we might be able to decrease greenhouse gas emissions with a partnership with MG&E. And then I also agree with a lot of concern around the Badger Mill Creek, and in particular how that might impact flow and water quality in the Badfish Creek if we divert that to that. So those are my two main comments.
Okay, thank you, Beth. Anyone else? Tom?
Well, I'm agreeing with what everybody else has said so far. So that's one thing. For some kind of solar energy system, where will we talk about doing that? Are there particular areas that you were thinking about that with MG&E? And they all in MG&E's territory and all these other wonderful things, which needs to be fleshed out a little bit. And then just a couple of things, and it's related to that, and maybe also the Badger Mill Creek issue, which to me is an incredible issue. Of course, it's going to save energy, but just putting that in some kind of report that we generate, that's
I think we might have.
Tom, I
lose
can't
him?
hear you anymore.
no reasons for it. And then all of a sudden, recommend for energy savings that we pull that out doesn't seem, there's something about it which really gnaws at me. And I think it's because report.
Tom, you're cutting out.
If we have a report that then says that we should do that, I think that's an issue that we need to think about before we actually put it in a written document. So those are my comments, Tom.
Okay, thank you, Tom. You broke out a little bit, but I think I fully understood what you were saying is basically that it's we don't want to necessarily be putting the Badger Mill Creek into a report at this point because there's other issues involved than just energy generation. And I agree with
Well,
that.
yeah, absolutely. Because the concern is that if we were to publish something that becomes part of our recommendation that we're then going to use to make determinations with something that is just expedient for us from energy savings, I think that's a mistake, and we're going to hear about that in ways we don't want to hear about that. But that's just my thought.
No, I agree. Ezra, you have a comment?
I'm sorry, could I jump in? I'd like to respond to Commissioner Wilson's first question about where would the solar go.
Okay.
The district owns some large tracts of land immediately south of the plant on the other side of Moreland Road. One tract is currently a farm field, and the other tract is what undeveloped. And so we have been considering those parcels of land for something like this. The one parcel is 95 acres, which would be more than enough to handle the size system that we've been contemplating. But there are, of course, other considerations when we look at what it would mean to take up land for something like this. So again, we highlight those considerations more with you in the future. But the point is, right next door is where we would consider putting the solar. Yes?
Yeah, yes, and thanks, Matt. Yeah, I realize that there's lots of property. There's property up here in the town of Westport on beautiful farm field, for a facility at some time that could be considered. The only thing I have an issue with on a larger array is there's more to just saying, yeah, we're going to do that. And I know you've got that. It's the same thing with what you're looking at from a perspective is what can we do to save energy? But from the commission's aspect, then we're going to take that document and use it to make plans. And there's a lot of other considerations to consider besides just energy savings when we put out a document, and it could be what's next to that property and what is the local government's land use for that property and all these things that I know you got to start somewhere, but before we start publishing something that's out there for the public to consider as our plan, we don't want people coming to our meetings with tar and feathers because we've decided on, or we've put something in a document that looks like we've decided something. That's my concern. I'm not allergic to tar and feathers, believe me, but I'm not the only one that sits on the commission, and I don't think Ken would look very good in feathers myself.
Well, thank you, Tom. I appreciate that.
Okay, Ezra.
Thanks for the report, Matt. I had a couple things I wanted to echo a bunch of things that several people have said. Definitely like Grant's 3 points, and on Badger Mill Creek. I mean, I think obviously there's so much to consider there on water balance, and the reason why we did that in the first place was about water balance between watersheds. And to my mind, nothing wrong with taking a look at this point at those environmental benefits that we did that for in the first place around water balance, but also the environmental downsides of the huge amount of energy intensity around force mains that send that water, whatever it is, 7 miles comes to mind. I'm not sure if that's exactly right. So I think that, having that conversation is good and ripe and right, and we should do it whenever the time is right. I don't know how urgent that is, if that's like a CIP ahead of this year's budget. I'm sort of guessing no, but I don't, and whether we make a recommendation in there that says, let's look at that and weigh all the pros and cons and make that a sort of conditional recommendation in this report. I don't know if that would satisfy Tom's concern. I think it would make me happy. I mean, if that wasn't a recommendation, we're going to do this, but rather we're going to look into the possibility of this given its energy benefits and weigh all the holistic considerations, I'd be okay with that. The third thing I wanted to mention was picking up on Beth's point about MG&E. Remind me if I'm right or not about this, Matt. When I sat in on the Dane County Climate Task Force, I think partly I was asked to join the water sector sort of stakeholder group, let's call it, because of my involvement here at the commission. If I'm remembering right, the water utility and the district are two of the top 3 or 5 customers for MG&E across its entire customer area by energy use per year. Does that sound about right?
Yes, I don't know the exact number. I would, I'd like to know more about where you're going with that, because
Well,
I would also caution how we use that terminology to characterize our energy situation.
Okay. Well, I'm certainly, this may be where you're headed with what you're saying there. I mean, we do an incredible job of lowering the cost to our owner communities and the ratepayers every year with some really great creation of energy on site and that sort of thing, which I've always really appreciated about the district. But that being said, I notice every time but I'm not the only one, when we're looking at bills every month, we're paying a couple $100,000 a month to MG&E. The biggest cost center I have ever seen, you know, obviously capital aside, but it's the biggest cost center in those monthly bills is that MG&E bill. It's just ginormous. So, I mean, so we're a really big energy user. We could have lots of discussions about how fast MG&E is moving in the direction of a carbon neutral future. And we can have discussions about whether we want to move faster or whether we don't, because obviously that's where we get our electricity from mostly at present. But anyway, picking up on Beth's point, I think for us to really engage MG&E a bit in that discussion, presuming that I'm right, that we're one of their top 5, let's say, customers, we want to pursue a path where we're really thinking proactively about our energy, where it comes from, the environmental and community, impact of it. I think they have a lot of overlapping interests there. And so I think for us to be engaged in a real proactive dialogue with them about those futures and how we fit into their total demand that they've got to meet and everything would be wise. I mean, and so I hope maybe you've already done that as part of this process. I wouldn't be surprised if you have, but I just think there's room there. And again, giving Beth credit for sort of surfacing this, there's room for some conversation with MG&E where we might find some real mutual interest and some paths forward that are of mutual benefit.
Yes, I will just affirm what you and Commissioner Bookland are picking up on. We are one of MG&E's most significant customers. We have had some discussions with them already as part of the study, and based on your input here and the things that you have identified as important, we expect to continue discussions with them around things like solar energy partnerships, backup generation. So you are affirming that we're already seeing the right direction here. So thank you.
Yeah, that's great. I will say I like the, I think this is just underscoring a point that Grant made. The notion of producing all of our own or a significant proportion of our own energy with gas on site is less interesting to me, but more of these renewable, low to no GHG emissions solutions, whether that's in partnership with MG&E directly or more indirectly, that's of more, greater interest to me. So just to give you a little flavor for direction as far as at least this one commissioner's point of view.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Matt.
Okay, Grant, you have your hand up again?
Yeah, thanks. Just wanted to add in my perspective on the point that Commissioner Wilson raised. And I'm sort of newer to the commission, and I'm definitely not tracking on probably some of the community sensitivities that I think he's highlighting. I would just say, I think Commissioner Meyer kind of mentioned this, but I mean, obviously we're having this conversation right now. We've already, we've put out some concepts that are worth further conversation. In terms of what is or isn't in that report, I would just generally be in favor of not being afraid of sort of putting things in there, but just maybe being very thoughtful about sort of wording and, not jumping to conclusions, but rather saying, hey, here are things that are, worth further consideration. Just be clear that there are other considerations beyond just energy that need to be contemplated before any decisions are made. But I think putting that all in there and just being transparent and saying, hey, here are things that are worth highlighting related to the energy conversation, but further dialogue is needed or something would be an approach I'd be really comfortable with.
Okay. I'm seeing Commissioner Wilson give the thumbs up on that, and so yeah, I just wanted to say message heard from all of you on that point. I just wanted to confirm that I do understand the full message here. So again, this is a master plan. The whole message of this effort is these are things we should consider doing. This document will not allow us to go out and build anything. So the next step in any of these options would be to do facility planning, where we further consider the implications of any of these ideas. So I'm hearing you say, make sure to underscore and emphasize that point in this document. And I just would like to, I think, hear from Commissioner Wilson again. Is that an acceptable approach for you, or are there certain things that you really feel would best be served not included in the report whatsoever?
Well, I think it's definitely the way to go about that, those are things that you've identified that are energy savers or could be part of this master plan, but there's other considerations that we've got to look at. That's what what you just heard from Grant is exactly probably the way you should put it. Just we need to be a little bit, this is a document that's going out, you're calling it a master plan. My idea of master planning is a little less top down and more bottom up, which would mean we'd have people in the public telling us what they think about it. But I guess that's our job. So I think that you just need to be sensitive about that. Grant gave some great suggestions for how to go about doing that. I think that they need to be more things that we're going to look at and consider, but there's other things that we have to worry about, other issues that we have to address before we proceed doing these items. So anyway, thanks, Grant.
I think what we have to recognize is that there's a number of issues that will have to go through kind of a business case holistic approach. One of those being the Badger Mill Creek, that it can't just be made on the basis of energy alone. I was one of the only commissioner that was present at the time when we made that decision to put in the infrastructure and to transfer due to the concerns of the transfer of water from one basin to another, the interbasin transfer of water, and that was the intent to offset that. I don't know if there's a possibility of, and I understand what you're saying in terms of the treatment plant, but I don't know if there's a possibility where we transfer water at certain times of the year versus others. That might, maybe less in the winter, although I've had people comment to me how much they enjoy because that transfer, because they can kayak in that water in the wintertime and parts of the Badger Mill Creek. So that's, I think, what Tom is getting at, that there's a lot of people that now have that expectation of what is there, and then to take that away changes those expectations. Oops. A couple other things I wanted to add. We have 3 commissioners that are absent today, and I think their views are important. We also see that we have, various goals or ideas laid out, and some of them, there's some conflict between them, or tension, I should say, maybe not conflict, but some tension. And my feeling is that the next time we discuss this, we should be in person and hopefully have more commission members in attendance, because I think there's a lot of policy issues that are important here in terms of how we move ahead with things or don't move ahead with things. So I see Sarah's here now. I didn't see her when she arrived. Sorry, Sarah. But So there's two commissioners, I think, when I looked at the meeting earlier this morning when we started. But I think that the solar kind of is intriguing to me, but I'd like to know how many acres it would need. And because you said 95 would be more than sufficient. And then what would the cost be doing it with MG&E versus not? And I also want to point out that when you talk about the resiliency using MG&E generators, you get into a whole different ballgame when the generators are MG&E generators, particularly in terms of public perception, because MG&E uses those generators as peak generating capacity. So on a hot summer day when they need more peak generating capacity, they turn on those generators. And that's a different scenario than when your power goes out for that facility and then you're just running that generator to offset the power shortage. And so there's usually different approvals from local units that are involved with that. And particularly if we're looking at putting these at our pump stations, you get into whole issues of noise and other things related to the generators as well. Let's see. So I guess I'll.
Could I attempt to answer a few of those questions informally right now with the solar?
Well, maybe that'll be a future discussion, but
Okay.
I see Commissioner Eskridge has her hand
Yep.
up.
Sarah, you got your hand up? Sarah, you want to go?
I think Matt was asking if he could answer your questions. I
Yeah.
can't imagine you shouldn't do that, Matt.
Yeah.
I think you should do that.
Well, very briefly, large scale solar, we've been discussing something around a 10 megawatt array. Rule of thumb is about 6 acres per megawatt. So we'd be talking about a 60 acre installation, plus or minus. That is, I think, all I wanted to add there. Oh, the cost. If we were to construct an array of that size by ourselves, I'd have to go back and look, but I want to say the capital was upwards of $8 million. So a significant cost for us to front the bill if we were to do it on our own.
Okay, thank you. Sarah?
Yeah, I apologize for coming into the conversation late, and I look forward to going back and reviewing your slides when they're up on the website, Matt. But I guess my question, and maybe, again, apologies if you've already answered it, but what are next steps in terms of communicating this out, starting to get at Commissioner Hovell and Commissioner Wilson's perspective on, right, how do we engage some of our owner communities and others in these conversations? I just wonder if you're already thinking about that, or what the role the commission might be able to play in helping to facilitate some of that further conversation as we advance forward.
Excellent question. I'm going to nod over to Michael on this one a little bit, but what I will say is what I began the presentation with is we're near the finish line with this project, but it's not complete. So we're still preparing the final report, and I believe we'll be coming back to you once that is done. So there'll be some more discussion there. And then any projects that come out of this will likely need to go through facility planning. So there will be more opportunity for input. But in terms of how to have a discussion with you as the commission and your role, I think that's I'd like to hear from Michael on that. I don't know if I can tell you that answer.
Though the CIP will assume some general directions that will be coming to you in July, where you can start seeing some of the potential implications on our finances with these options, and that'll be another next step. But I think as the report gets near the end, I think it'll be really good. I think Commissioner Hovell expressed a desire to have an in-person study session where we can look at the variables and go through a winnowing process with you to help refine our direction. And that would be probably the next step once the study is done.
Okay, that's helpful. And I think just as context, it would be helpful to me in preparing for some of those conversations to potentially do some input gathering from our owner communities, even if that's just, conversations with those of us who've been appointed by Madison, having conversations with the city and those towns and villages. And I know that you regularly now engage on the budget process with our various constituencies, Michael, so that will happen to some degree, but I think it would be great to be a little bit proactive about something like this in terms of bigger picture conversation before we get into the details of how this is going to impact capital planning, just as a way to engage them in the process as we advance forward.
Okay, is that all, Sarah?
Yep, I'm all set.
Okay. Okay, Grant, and then Tom.
Thanks. Yeah, just to piggyback on what Sarah was discussing, I mean, I don't know what our schedule is for our kind of upcoming owner community meetings, but I mean, seems like a great topic to, as one way that we could sort of get some of that input. And then the other thing I was just going to say is, I don't know, Matt, if this has already happened, but City of Madison, for example, has some adopted plans around sustainability and energy goals. And I would say we are very aggressively pursuing renewables and energy efficiency, et cetera. And a lot of that is codified in some adopted plans. So that would be, I think that's a good starting place, even in terms of what's on paper for City of Madison. And I'm not sure what other owner communities might have that might be similar, but I think that would be something to really consider and would be a good head start in terms of if we're looking for alignment with what the values and kind of goals are, at least for City of Madison. I think there's some good stuff out there that would be relevant.
Okay, Tom, did you have, you took your hand down. Okay, anybody else?
He beat me to it, that
Okay.
having an owner community meeting that focuses on this, I think is really would be a great idea to engage them.
I agree. Okay, so I think anybody else have any other comments? I don't see any hands showing up. So I think, Matt, you got some marching orders. Be very careful how you word things in the plan, that we want to see some outreach with the owner communities through one of our owner community meetings. And then I think that there are other issues, but it came up, I think you marked down. So I think, do you have anything else you need from us?
No, I just want to say thank you for the robust discussion. I wasn't sure where this was going to go, but I feel like I heard from each of you and multiple thoughts, and I very much appreciate it. I think it will only help make this an outstanding final product, and look forward to bringing it back to you in the future.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
That will then take us to item 4B, the cybersecurity awareness training. And Lori Dunn, you're going to lead this off?
Yes, I will. Is my screen showing?
Yes, it is.
All right. So I'm Lori Dunn. I'm the district technology manager. I'm here today as a follow-up to the February 11th commission meeting. At that meeting, I gave an update on the district's cybersecurity awareness training, our CAT program. And at that time, there was a request for some follow-up training for commissioners. So today will be the first in a series of 4 short presentations of that training. Plus, there'll be some material for you to view online outside of the meeting. The training will include some foundational information and also information that's focused on risks for individuals in a commission or executive role. This first training is focused mainly on the foundational topics, and then the next 3 meetings after this will address security concerns that are more specific to your roles. During this first session, we will view a short episode of Inside Man, and Inside Man series is similar to what you might see on Netflix, but there's an added bonus that there's learning about good cybersecurity practices. The second module in this first training group is called Social Engineering Red Flags. Social engineering is what is commonly used to manipulate people into divulging their personal or confidential information, and then that information is used to access accounts or technology networks. Phishing is probably the most widely used and well-known method of this type, and it is discussed in the training module, but other methods are covered as well. Because of copyright rules, we are not able to show the social engineering module during the meeting, but that's probably better because the module is interactive with some questions given to you as you work your way through the material. To access the material, you'll have to set up your KnowBe4 account. So tomorrow morning, you will receive an email that includes a link to set that up. The link will take you through a series of steps to set up your account, and it does a pretty good job of walking you through that process. But just in case, we also attached instructions for setting up your account to the commission packet. One thing I'd like to emphasize is when you're setting that up or running any of the material, it's best to run that either in a Chrome, Safari, or IE11 or greater browser. And if you run into any issues, you have any questions or comments, do feel free to contact me. So if there's not any questions, we could start the first episode of Inside Man.
Great, Lori, if you could stop sharing while I get this loaded for you. And Lori, while this is coming up, can you tell the commissioners what email address they should look for that email from?
Oh boy, it might be a little obfuscated, but it should come from KnowBe4. And you should see our logo in it also.
And Lori, now I don't have sound again. 1 second.
Yeah, you had sound.
I did? Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
I apologize. Didn't seem like I did on my side.
Yeah, it's just quiet music to start.
How bad is it?
It's bad.
Yeah, I'm just leaving now. Yeah. I'll be about 10 minutes.
Excuse me, you can't go outside with your badge?
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
It's a denial of service attack. The website's been down for 17 minutes, but the attack also means that the internal emails are slowed to a crawl.
I know that. What are we doing to fix it?
We need to release a statement, Ed.
I don't even know what's happening yet. How can I release a statement?
Then tell them we don't know what the cause is, but we're working on it. We can't be seen to have our trousers down.
They are down. They're round our bloody ankles. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Thanks. Thank you.
They're using an IP broadcast to amplify their ping.
Who is?
We don't know.
Fiona, get the vendor on the phone now. Oh, someone find Fiona.
Excuse me, sir. Can I help you?
Yeah, I've got a job interview. I think I'm a bit lost. Where's the IT department?
Well, Ed Lewis is up on 5, but most of the team's down here, so... IT security, eh? Okay, interesting. Oh, that's his admin, Fiona. Fiona, this is, what's your name again?
Mark Shepherd.
He has a job interview with Ed?
No, I'm on a judge's calendar. There's nothing. Oh, Mark Shepherd, 11 a.m.
Look, it's all hands on deck, so you might just have to wait.
Fiona is asking for you.
Look, just wait here. AJ, are you okay to wait with him?
Sure.
Ed, I still need a statement from you.
I'm sorry, I've just been firefighting.
I wish I was in there. I've actually been taking night classes to get a job on Ed's team. I've wanted to be in IT security ever since I was a kid. Signing me this statement, Gene Hackman's all like, you have something they want, and Will Smith's all like, I don't have anything.
Free comment. I have to give them something.
We're trying to take down all IP-directed broadcasts to our routers, but it's taking time.
We don't have any time.
You could just reconfigure your operating system.
Who is this?
He's here about the security position.
Why is he in this room?
It's a Smurf attack. You could just ignore all the requests coming from the network, or you could reconfigure your perimeter firewall to disallow all pings coming from outside the network, but it's faster just to disallow ICMP responses to IP broadcast requests.
It sounds right.
We're back up and running. I'm coming down now.
That was epic.
I see you have a fair amount of experience dealing with security risk assessments. I guess we saw that today. Set him up on a 1-month contractors agreement. We'll start there and see how we get along.
Your call's been moved to 2 p.m. and you've got to sit down with Diane at 3.
Right, thank you.
Well, that was fast. Really impressive. Now, the way you just dived in there and sorted everything, you know, it takes a lot to impress Ed like that. Look, have a seat, and I'll go get your paperwork. Coffee? Tea?
No, I'm all right, thanks.
Okay, back in a jiff.
Hi, Mum.
Are you in?
Yeah, it went great. I was able to help them with a problem they were having, and they offered me a temporary contract.
Amazing how easy it is to stop an attack that you just launched. Just get set up on their system, and I'll let you know what to do next.
Okay. Can I ask you a question? Why did you pick me for this?
No, you're not my best, it's true. But you do have useful skills and you're in the right country. But more importantly, look around you. Everyone in that office is a sheep, blindly doing what they're told, when they're told, all to line someone else's pockets. To be honest, Mark, you look like you belong there. You look like a sheep. No offense.
Remember, make sure visitors return their passes to authorized members of staff.
don't allow anyone to tailgate or piggyback. One badge equals one entry. Be suspect of visitors without an official escort. Ask who they are with and verify directly with that person. Next time.
Oh, I've heard all about you, riding in out of the blue to save the day like Lancelot.
Make friends.
That's not really my forte.
We have an oversharing problem.
Most people do.
Back to you, Lori or Commissioner Havel.
I guess if there's no questions, I'm good to go.
Okay, anybody have any questions? Nope. Well, thank you very much, Lori. And then could you repeat what we can expect tomorrow?
Yes, you should, tomorrow morning, you should receive an email and it will mention the training and it will include a link. And when you click on the link, it will bring you to the Know Before website and it will step you through the process to set up your account. You'll need to create a password, kind of similar to a lot of other websites.
Okay, and will that be going to our district emails?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so people check your district emails. Thank you very much.
Yep,
and then that moves us on to the Chief Engineer and Director report. Michael, the Pump Station 7 force main update.
Yes, things are on schedule as I reported to you 2 weeks ago. We are still waiting for final confirmation of when the vinyl liner resin will arrive, but all the pipe or the liner pipe is there. And so we're still planning to start work on July 6th, and we have received everything else. So we're just in a holding pattern right now for some of the last bits of product for that. Two other brief updates. We had our owner meeting, community meeting last week. The theme was Better Together. And we had 22 community members attend that meeting, and including 2 commissioners, Commissioner Swanson and Commissioner Foster were in attendance. We had fellow community representatives, Therab Jacobson and Amy Irwin and Jim Hessling of the Village of McFarland. They were there to talk about the projects we have on chloride, and Theron Jacobson was there from the city of Verona to talk about the MOU we have with a joint construction project. And so those were the items for the owner meeting. The policy governance training is continuing, and directly following this commission meeting, the commission task group on CED performance and President Hovell will be attending the first seminar at 10 o'clock, and that's leading up to some videos that we have watched leading up to this seminar today, and some reading material. And there's a staff group also going through parallel training on how to write monitoring reports that will be acceptable to the commission, going through a similar process. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Alan, you have the operations report.
Thank you. Give me a moment here to get my screen shared. Are you seeing that?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I'm Alan Grooms, Operations Manager at the district, and I'll be presenting the May performance data and plant report for the June commission meeting. Looking at the dashboard metrics for where we're at for our May performance. Again, the normal arrangement that we have with the gauge is kind of showing the normal range in the shaded portion and where we're at with respect to our limits. big changes with this with respect to, and Drew did a nice job of highlighting the differentiation by season, but for ammonia, we have a similar change in summertime for CBOD5 as well. So you'll note, if you're recalling from normal months for CBOD5, that went from 19 milligrams per liter to 7, so tightened up quite a bit. We're still well within our normal parameters, but that range of values that we're allowed to operate in becomes much tighter in the summer. Similarly for ammonia, that dropped, I think it's like 4.1, dropped to 1.1 for the summertime months. And so we're running right about mid-range for that. A little higher than we typically run. Again, we had some, we've been struggling a little bit with some higher nitrogen loadings to the plant recently, but still operating well within our operating limits. The rest of the parameters all look pretty good. Phosphorus kind of right where it tends to run. Solids are pretty typical for this time of year. Chlorides, I'm going to get to a little bit more detail later. We're at 384. That's about where it was last month. So it's on the higher end of our normal range, but within our limits. And then our fecals numbers are well below our 3-year average in the shaded portion. That's a reflection, I think, of how well the new system is performing our disinfection function. So any questions on these dashboards? Looking at the resource recovery dashboard, again, tracking much along the same lines. There's really no change in the MetroGo cake. We have not made cake. We are looking to, in the next 4 to 6 weeks, make some for a test project. But otherwise, that's probably going to sit pretty idle. Struvite production, we're on pace for basically a 3-year low in struvite production. It's just a function of what we've got coming to the plant and what's coming through as far as phosphorus and what we're able to recover from that. So that appears to be that we're going to be, it's difficult to say, but we're 5 months into the year. So it's at this point starting to even out the highs and lows per month. So those numbers tend to start even out. It looks to me like we're going to come out somewhere probably between 550 and 600 tons. So that looks like a continuation of a trend we've seen the last few years, as you can see. Clean water, we're also on track for right around 15 billion gallons. So again, that's a reflection of how dry we've been. So everything else looks to be right on track for what would be a pretty normal year. Any questions on the resource recovery? Okay. With that, last month we recall there was a question on the chloride numbers. I think we were, if I'm recalling, 385. I think last month. This month it's 384. Actually, this might no, that looks about right. So what we're looking at, the question was asked whether that's typical for like attributable maybe some of the cleaning fluids. I forget which commissioner asked the question, but it was a good question why the numbers were higher than normal. And sometimes in the moment you don't think of the answer right away. And so it's kind of had said that we thought that it could be still flushing out from the spring or from the winter snowmelt type thing. But we didn't really have a good answer for that. And I think actually after a little bit more thought, the answer to this is dilution. Our flows are down, so our concentrations are up. And that's why I think sometimes I can be a little frustrating by staff here. It's like, a single answer, a single piece of data doesn't tell you enough. So a lot of our limits, we look at the concentrations and that's how they're given to us, but the concentrations only tells part of the story. And so when we're looking at this, what I'm showing here is in the blue and the green are in the blue is the last 2015 to 2020 flow average and same month. And then this is June of 2020 through May of 2021 in the green of flows. So you can see that starting in about August of last year, we dropped below the normal flow, and that's listed on the left-hand axis. So we're, as everybody knows, I mean, we're running low on rainfall, and our flows to the plant are down. Similarly, in the red is our average for chloride during those same period of time, the preceding 5 years, and then in the purple is the last 12 months. And you can see that has, as these flows have dropped below, have dropped down, these levels have converged, and now we have the concentrations are actually higher. So it makes it look like we're putting out a higher amount of chlorides to the environment. The other piece of that story, though, is let's look at mass. when we put that concentration together with the amount, the quantity of flow, we see here in the blue, this is the 5-year preceding year average per month for massive chloride discharged from Nine Springs versus in the red, the last 12 months of data. And you can see very consistently, we've been actually lower on chlorides throughout the past year than the preceding 5-year average. And so it's really, I think, a function, the higher concentrations we see on those reports are a function of the lower flows, the less dilution. So mass-wise, we're actually seeing less. And I think that's a good reflection of the positive efforts that Ecosystems is doing with their outreach efforts into the community, the softener programs we've got going, the salt-wise programs, all of these programs. I think this reflects pretty well how that's working. I decided also this colorful graph here on the right, it was just kind of sorting this by month, and it actually surprised me. I was not expecting to find this. So I put, blue, what I would typically consider the colder weather months, January, February, December. Sunny yellow is the middle of the summer, green is spring, and then orange is fall. And the first thing that stood out was, the last 12 months of the year on the bottom half of the graph. So what this is telling us, and this is all sorted by mass, from high mass to low mass. So what we're seeing is, the latter part of the summer and fall, and even into December, that effect of road ice has been purged out, and I think we're seeing that the road ice, the salt for ice melt, has been purged out of the system and coming in, and so you're down more around the baseline level for household use, softeners, that sort of thing. This up here in the top, you see two of our colder weather months, but maybe I was a bit surprised at how prevalent the spring months, March, April, and May were in here, how prominently figured, and even into June, that these levels were all at the top. So I think that was kind of what Ecosystems had indicated to me after the meeting, and I think it's supported by this, that effect of washing that out of our system, that purging of that salt from our system, maybe goes on longer than we expect. So any questions on those, on the chloride? Probably talk more than I want, but it's an interesting topic.
Thanks a lot, Alan. I think I was the one who brought it up last time. I really appreciate the in-depth coverage today.
And I think it was you, Commissioner Meyer, but I wasn't 100% sure, so I just left a general attribution. So you're welcome.
Okay, thank you very much, Alan. That will move us to regulatory and legal review. Paul?
Good morning. Well, fortunately, last month was a little less intense than some of the recent months. So that's been helpful. On the regulatory front, we continue to monitor PFAS. We're going to be trying to put some wrap up on our disinfection work with the department, and looking at some permitting issues. In terms of HR, we had some follow-up on our UC hearing, but that's now completed. Contracts, there were some issues with respect to cost sharing on the University Avenue corridor. Some questions arose on the River Road property that we looked at. And other general matters, included a little bit of some public records review on a couple of specific items. But all in all, not too intense a period, but able to get stuff covered. So be glad to entertain any questions. Otherwise, that's all I have until next meeting.
Okay, thank you, Paul. I don't see any hands up for any questions. Okay, that will take us to future meeting schedule. It's in the packet. Future agenda topics. Anyone have anything? Other business? One thing I'd like to bring up, when do we want to get back together? We talked about meeting once every few months in person. And Michael, do we have a good meeting coming up that would be a good one to be in person for?
We could plan an upcoming meeting. Usually we're getting into the budget time. That may be for budget discussion, might be a good study session format meeting coming up in September.
Okay, so look in September. Is that okay with everybody? Okay. So then adjournment.
I'll move we adjourn. Wilson.
Motion by Commissioner Wilson, second by Commissioner Meyer, I think. I see his thumbs up.
Happy to second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of the week.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye.